Coming in at number 5 we have Dr. Jack Kevorkian Death Van, also known as the Deathmobile. Dr. Jack Kevorkian's van was a place many people spent their last moments alive. The 1968 Volkswagen van was where Dr. Kevorkian carried out as many as 130 assisted suicides in the 90s, and has become a piece of history. However, at the time the pathologist was met with controversy and public criticism for his taboo work on physician-assisted suicide with terminally ill patients. He spent 8 years in prison for second-degree murder because of this, but is often viewed as a pioneer in the medical field and as an activist. His impact was so great that HBO released a drama called You Don't Know Jack, in which Al Pacino won an Emmy and a Golden Globe for his portrayal of the controversial doctor. Over the year, the death van has seen many different owners. Zach purchased this van for $32,500 from American Jewelry and Loan. When the Detroit pawn shop first bought the vehicle, it was actually featured on an episode of a TV show. Apparently, Long Island medium Teresa Caputo also passed by the van in their warehouse and said she felt something there. Visitors of Zach's Haunted Museum can peek inside the Dr. Jack Kevorkian's death van and see the exact spot where many people died. Coming in at number 4 we have Ed Gein's cauldron. This is certainly one of the more gruesome relics on display at Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum, and it's believed to have belonged to the butcher of Plainfield, Ed Gein. He's known for not only committing 2 murders but mutilating corpses and fashioning items from human skin. Some of this morbid creation include masks made from real human faces, a human skin lampshade, and a female skin suit. Although his kill count doesn't technically classify him as a serial killer, he still served as inspiration for several fictional serial killers like Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. This cauldron is said to have been a place for Ed Gein to boil body parts in, but its authenticity is largely unknown. It was auctioned off in 2015 by a man named Dan McIntyre. He claimed to have inherited it from his grandmother, who bought it in 1958 at Gein's estate sale following his arrest. That's bleak as The highest bidder was Zach, purchasing the little pot for $2,800. At the time, Dan said he was happy to be rid of it, as it was the source of strange phenomena. I mean, I wouldn't want that in my home. Now, Ed Gein's cauldron calls Zach's Haunted Museum home, where it is said to radiate negative energy. Coming in at number 3 we have the Demon House Staircase. The original staircase from the Gary Demon House is said to be so haunted that construction crews walked off the job and refused to come back after its installation. Set back in a dimly lit corner, the wooden staircase rests on a layer of dirt extracted from the location famous for demonic activity. The Demon House was located in Gary, Indiana, and was unfortunately home to the Ammons family. It was said to be a portal to hell, and the demons seemed to emanate from beneath the stairs, the same stairs displayed at Zach's museum. There were reports of demonic possessions, a child levitating, and many other disturbing events. The family's matriarch, LaToya Ammons, had to undergo multiple exorcisms as a result. It was so bad that even the local police department and social services were convinced of its purported hauntedness. There are things in this world that we will never fully understand, like why Zach decided to buy the home plagued by demonic entities. He did shoot his documentary Demon House there, where he investigated the haunting. It must have left an impact on him because the house has since been demolished and the stairs continue to haunt Zach's museum. Coming in at number 2 we have the Devil's Rocking Chair. This sinister chair is linked to a very famous investigation done by Ed and Lorraine Warren, and its story serves as the plot for The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It. Zach actually purchased this chair for $67,000 just hours before the death of Lorraine Warren. Ooh, creepy. The Devil's Rocking Chair was the site of the infamous exorcism of David Glatzel, who was allegedly possessed by a demon. The 11-year-old at the time was being tormented by a man-like demon who resembled a beast with sharp jagged teeth, horns, and hoofs. As the haunting progressed, the chair was said to be under the demon's power, and David would often see the beast sitting in it. Ed and Lorraine performed numerous exorcisms on David in that very chair. The final exorcism was a success, and the demon was expelled from David right into his sister's boyfriend, who killed his landlord shortly after. He pled not guilty due to demonic possession, a first in American history, citing that the devil made me do it. It didn't work, by the way. In 2019, the Devil's Rocking Chair's exhibit actually had to be shut down because it was doing its job a little too well. 6 different people shared the same disturbing experience with the chair. They all had bouts of uncontrollable crying, and one even collapsed above it. The museum having adverse effects on visitors isn't anything new, with ambulances having to be called in the past, but this was the first time in the museum museum's history that an exhibit had to be shut down. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Dybbuk box. In the number 1 spot is known as the most haunted object in the world, the notorious Dybbuk box. According to Jewish mythology, a Dybbuk is a malevolent spirit that's said to haunt and possess the living, and the Dybbuk box is home to the evil entity. This wine cabinet is so haunted that it actually served as inspiration for the horror film The Possession. The Dybbuk box first became a sensation when it was listed on eBay, along with an extensive ghost story attached to it. After some owner hopping, it came into Zach's possession. Shortly after the Dybbuk box arrived in the museum, holes allegedly began to appear around the haunted cabinet. A downtown Las Vegas marketing executive also apparently witnessed a black-cloaked apparition pass through the exhibit's door while doing a private tour with Zach. This haunted relic is no joke. Even Post Malone was apparently cursed by the Dybbuk when he visited the museum with Zach himself. After touching Zach's shoulder, who was resting his hand on the box, Post Malone had a streak of terrible luck. In less than a month, his private jet was forced to make an emergency landing when 2 tires blew out. His house was broken into by armed robbers, and then he got into a car crash.
Starting off this countdown, we have Mary Todd Lincoln's dress. This beautiful dress was once owned by Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife. It's a beautiful purple velvet dress with satin and lace detailing. She wore this dress during the Washington winter social season in 1861–62. But here's the thing. After her husband's death, Mary went into mourning for a long period of time. In fact, she stayed in widow's clothes up until her own death in 1882. So she had no use for this dress anymore. So she gave this dress and some of her other items to her family members. This dress was given to her cousin Elizabeth Todd Grimsley. In 1916, Grimsley's son sold the dress to the Smithsonian's First Ladies collection. And now, apparently, it's haunted by Mary Todd herself. People have heard weeping when they have been near this dress. On a number of occasions, they have actually seen Mary Todd Lincoln's apparition by the dress. Thankfully, she means no harm. But if you think about it, it's quite sad. Even in the afterlife, she's still mourning over the loss of her husband. Hopefully, she can eventually find peace and reunite with him. Moving on to number 4, we have the Smithsonian. One of the most haunted items in the Smithsonian is the museum itself. It is haunted by a number of ghosts. As a result, they actually offer ghost tours on location for people interested in the paranormal. On a number of occasions, workers have seen past Smithsonian scientists who would work on the collections there. But the most active ghost is that of the Smithsonian's first curator and second secretary, Spencer Fullerton Bard. Almost all of the night guards at the Smithsonian have seen his ghost wandering the halls. They see him gliding through the halls, people try to talk to him, and then he disappears into thin air. Then you have the ghost of Secretary Joseph Henry that also likes to show his face around town. According to the night guards, they said, and I quote, "Henry is often seen fully clothed in the garments he wore in life, walking through the exhibits before returning to his post." His post being the statue the museum has in place for him. Dude, what in the night of the museum is this? Seriously. Then you have the countless unidentified entities that also haunt the halls. These are just like black shadowy figures people have seen in passing. At least it seems like these ghosts mean no harm. Like, sure, it's kinda spooky, but at least they aren't malicious. Also, hit that thumbs up button if you want to see me go ghost hunting at the Smithsonian. I'm down. I'm down. In our third spot today, we have the ancient Egyptian treasures. Rumor has it that a number of treasures or artifacts from ancient Egypt are cursed. I mean, you all know about King Tut's curse. Well, there are a couple of items in the Smithsonian from ancient Egypt that are definitely haunted. For starters, we have the scarab. This scarab is believed to be from King Tut's tomb. For starters, it is believed that bad luck will fall on anyone who handles King Tut's body or other artifacts in his tomb. Everything in there is believed to be cursed by King Tut himself. I'm sure you've heard of the story of Howard Carter and his team that excavated the tomb. After doing so, several of the people involved died suddenly and mysteriously, so it's believed that this scarab is cursed along with the other items there. And then we have the mummified cat head. Yeah, you heard me. Now this one actually isn't from King Tut's tomb, but a woman named Mab B. Nylon donated a cat's head. Yeah, just the head. Who knows where the body is? Hey, maybe she kept it for herself and it's on display in her house. I'm not gonna judge. Anyways, this creepy thing is a preserved mummified cat's head wrapped in linen. Inside contains a real cat skull. Well, according to a number of workers, they have seen a ghostly cat apparition move around this display. This damn ghost cat is probably out looking for the rest of its body. This cat has also been seen wandering the halls and in several other exhibits as well. Moving on at number 2, we have the Black Aggie. This all started back in the 1800s when a woman named Marianne Hooper Adams, known by her friends as Clover, sunk into a terrible depression. As a result, she drank some of her photography developing chemicals and took her own life. After her death, her husband commissioned a sculptor to make a memorial statue of her. It was named the Adams Memorial, and later Black Aggie. But because of how it looked, people called it Grief, and that's when this creepy legend surrounding it was born. Legend goes that if you stare into her eyes long enough, they'll open up and start glowing red. Those that see her eyes will either be killed by her or she will cause you to go blind. Not only that, if you sit on the statue's lap at midnight, then you will die within 2 weeks. It's also said that pregnant ladies should never go near her. If they do, she will cause them to miscarry. Of course, this is just a creepy legend, right? Well, supposedly there's real life stories of this haunted statue taking people's lives. One man put a cigarette out on the statue's hand and he was later found dead with a gunshot wound to the head. Another man was found dead at the foot of the statue and no one knows his cause of death. Now, you may be wondering how the statue got to the Smithsonian. Well, because of the legend, a lot of people were breaking into the cemetery at night to visit it, and it was often vandalized. So the family donated it to the museum where it remains to this day. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Hope Diamond. This is a very beautiful diamond from India, but here's the thing. It was stolen from India, and then a curse was placed on it. Back in 1792, the Hope Diamond was part of a Hindu statue. It was one of the idol's eyes. And then somebody went in and took the 115-carat diamond out. Upon discovering that the diamond was stolen, priests put a curse on it. The curse was said to affect anyone that put their greedy little paws on it, which turned out to be a lot of people over the years. And guess what? Bad luck befell to every single one of its owners. It's said that the man who stole the diamond shortly came down with a raging fever and died shortly after. Legend continues on saying that his body was ravaged by wolves. Continuing on, King Louis XIV bought the stone and had it recut in 1673. He died of gangrene, and all his legitimate kids died early on in life. Then we have Marie Antoinette. Apparently she wore it as well. And we all know how bad things ended for her. Another story involved an heiress named Evelyn Walsh McLean. She bought the Hope Diamond and everyone around her started to die mysteriously. First it was her mother-in-law, then her son, then her husband left her and later died in a mental hospital, and then her daughter. She later sold the diamond to get rid of this curse. That's not even half the people affected by this diamond, like the list goes on and on. Now the haunted diamond is on display at the Smithsonian. Hopefully no one will ever try to steal it because we don't need to relive its curse over again.
Coming in at number 5, we've got the organ. Thankfully it's not an internal organ or anything like that, although to be honest I'm not so sure that would be any more creepy than this haunted musical instrument. Organs always tend to have a spooky sound to them, whether it's that classic bit from Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, or some old hymnals echoing through an empty church. The pipes and keys combine to create spine-chilling music more often than not. It's a classic sound used to elicit fear and atmosphere in all sorts of different environments. So of course the Warrens brought one back to the museum. It's not a grand affair, definitely not a pipe organ or anything close to one in size and scope. However, it does make up for a general lack of volume and dynamics with an array of haunted energy. The main thing that tends to set people off about this musical instrument is the fact that it likes to play itself. It's not a player piano, nor is there any sort of mechanism inside that would suggest that it was ever meant to make music without the help of a musician. But when the clock strikes 9 p.m, or the museum's apparent witching hour, this keyed instrument starts to play. I'm sure the first person to discover this detail was sufficiently spooked. Playing on its own isn't the only oddity associated with the organ. It's also known to cause anomalous things to happen to folks who play it. One might see a strange man standing beside the stool as they they play, or maybe they'll have dreams full of haunting music for a while. If you go in and hit a few keys on this organ, maybe even sit down and play a fugue, all sorts of unfortunate events may be in your near future. After the organ was retrieved from the supposedly haunted house of a reverend, it was placed in the museum. Interestingly enough, no anomalous activity was reported before it was brought back. However, the Warrens were no slouches when it came to decorating, and soon enough the organ was covered in all sorts of other interesting oddities. Now, this idea I came up with on my own, so don't take it as a fact or ask me to cite anything, but what if the things the Warrens placed upon the organ caused it to become haunted? Maybe the curses dwelling inside of those objects came out and played the organ themselves. Food for thought, for sure. Coming in number 4, we've got human skulls. Speaking of objects that may or may not be cursed but also make for great decorations, the Warrens had quite the collection of human head tops. The pearly white bone matter that makes up the shield for our most important organ. That's right, plenty of human skulls in the museum. And not just for archaeological and medical purposes, these were skulls supposedly used in different satanic rituals. Oh boy. There's one in particular that stands out thanks to its interesting coloration and decorations. The eye sockets are painted bright pink and really pop, and some of the teeth are a yellowy gold, and there is a large star adorning most of the skull's forehead. It's placed on an ornate stand among a plethora of other spooky knickknacks. I guess I shouldn't really be comparing a human skull to a knickknack, but here we are. Now, like I said before, the human skulls accumulated by the Warrens were supposedly used in satanic rituals quite a few times. I can't really elaborate on exactly what that would look like, but the fact that they were there means that it's possible the skulls are now cursed. The demons contacted during said rituals could have left some sort of residual energy in and around the skulls, especially because they did originate from humans. Folks have been terrified of satanic rituals for ages, often using them as shorthand for scary, morally depraved activities. We might not be able to figure out exactly what happened with these skulls, but they definitely hold some sway over folks who might visit the museum. It's morbid, it's creepy, and it smacks of the paranormal. Just hope that this kind of thing never ends up happening to your skull. Or you know what, maybe you'd prefer that the top of your head ends up in a museum. That's one way to stick around for a while, right? Coming in at number 3, we've got the haunted music box. Just another classic spooky object. Where would we be today without spring-wound machines that generate tinkly renditions of famous tunes? I feel like every 10 movies or so there's a shot of a haunted music box. Maybe that's a thing of the past at this point, but we do know that the Perron family dealt with a whole lot of nonsense stemming from a music box in the first Conjuring movie. Some things that appear in the Hollywood flicks don't actually exist in the real world, and they're just there to add some intrigue. The samurai suit and the Feely Mealy game were a couple examples of that, but we'll leave it at that for now. We'll focus back on the music box instead. After playing a big role in the exorcism of Bathsheba, it gained some wicked notoriety. Folks who had seen the movie assumed that this object was cursed in exactly the same way. That's not really the case, but it is fun to imagine, right? Music boxes are classic vessels for curses, especially thanks to the general creepy vibe the music can give off. How many cheap horror creations make use of a distorted music box song and some creepy childish laughter? Actually, keep the number to yourself, I already know it's way up there. Coming in number 2, we've got the white dress. Another urban legend staple, white dresses tend to show up in ghost stories often. Murdered brides, young women gone too soon, mothers who outlive their children, the works. It's hard to pin down where the phenomenon started, but we do know that it's timeless and effective. So of course, there's a haunted white wedding dress at the Warren Occult Museum. I'd be disappointed if there wasn't. In the Conjuring franchise, this dress is said to compel any who wear it to kill their fiancé. However, that's just more movie magic. There's no such tale actually associated with the museum. However, they do display a bridal gown, veil and all, and there is a supposed story that goes along with it. It's meant to represent the White Lady of Union Graveyard in Connecticut. A classic urban legend that we've definitely touched on here before, it's the tale of an unfortunate soul who roams the roads at night, causing accidents and freaking out motorists. Apparently one time she even materialized and put a dent in someone's fender. Unfortunately, the white dress in the museum isn't actually from the White Lady or anything related to her. It's just meant to represent the legend, add a little bit of class to the joint. Because who doesn't love looking at a pretty white dress? And finally at number 1, we've got the Conjuring Mirror. To cap things off, we'll talk about a particularly spooky reflective surface, the Conjuring Mirror. No relation to the actual Conjuring films though, so far anyway. This is one that has a truly terrifying story attached to it. The idea of mirrors as portals to other worlds is well documented, with different cultures around the world coming to similar conclusions about about these shiny planes. People often see things they wish they hadn't in a mirror, which is especially true of the one at the Warren Occult Museum. It's said that if you look into it for long enough, you'll start to see conjured spirits. In fact, the mirror apparently does its best to conjure these spirits upon the user. The story goes that Ed and Lorraine came into possession of it after its previous owner stared into the mirror for weeks on end. For a while nothing happened, but eventually it conjured up a series of faces and figures so gruesome and horrifying that the man lost his mind entirely. He was sent to a mental institution and the mirror was sent to the Warrens. Since then, people have looked into the mirror, but definitely not for weeks at a time. I wonder what would happen if someone replicated the experiment. Coming in at number 5, we've got a vampire coffin. Say what? The resting place of an undead bloodsucker? In this museum? Well, what happened to the previous tenant? Was it forceful eviction, or maybe a what we do in the shadows scenario where a vampire hunter snuck in through the basement and exposed an ancient vampire to sunlight? Regardless of how they came into possession of this burial box, the story probably isn't too pleasant. Still though, what a find. According to Ed and Lorraine, the coffin once belonged to a modern day vampire, but they didn't really elaborate too much on the details. That kind of vagueness just makes me want to know more, you know? Unfortunately, that story may have died with the famous couple, but we can definitely consider a whole plethora of options. There are all sorts of implications that come along with someone claiming to possess a vampire's coffin. How modern are we talking here? Were there other vampires in this one's undead community? Are they trying to blend in with the rest of society at this point, or is it a John Carpenter's vampires scenario where they're looking for more blood than ever? There haven't been too many sightings of vampires lately, at least by my count, so one has to wonder what's been going on. Twilight is trending again, so there's gotta be some sort of vampiric element in the air. A couple more months till October and then we'll know for sure. I wonder if there's anything inside the Warrens' coffin. I guess we can't really check at this point, but hey. If anyone has visited or seen someone open the coffin, would you be so kind as to drop the details down in the comments? I'd love to know if there are any rosaries, fangs, or vampire bones left behind. Maybe even some scorch marks that might suggest that the vampire did indeed get burned. Gosh, a modern vampire. I wonder if they like video games or watching sports on TV. Coming in number 4, we've got cursed photographs. Cue the Nickelback jokes. Look at this photograph. Every time I see it makes me suffer. Not as catchy, but you get the point anyway. While none are particularly legendary, you can definitely assume that any photographs at the museum have a creepy backstory. I'm actually kind of surprised more cursed photos aren't circulating these days. It seems like a lot of photographs with spirits and curses imbued within are from the age of the darkroom, or even before that. Do you think that tin-type pictures were more likely to be cursed? I suppose there was the good old practice of death photos. Plus, plenty of folks got included in family photos, even post-mortem, because the experience of having your picture taken was so rare. Folks have a lot more opportunities to snap pics of their friends and family these days, so images of corpses made up to be more alive are probably less common, at least as far as I know. The internet is a deep and dark place, and I'm sure there are folks who would pay top dollar for something like that taken with a mirrorless DSLR. Oh boy. Back to the museum though, there are entire walls covered in creepy old photographs. It kind of feels like a haunted house attraction at a theme park sometimes, now doesn't it? We've got brides with their faces totally obscured, white dress and all. Are those flowers symbolic or something? I guess we can't really know. Images of sinister looking men in hunting garb adorn the walls as well, making folks wonder what their story might be. Sullen-faced children looking past the camera, images of demonic figures, questionably dark photographs of things difficult to make out, the works. To look at these photos is one thing, but to have one in your home is something else entirely. Thankfully, they're at the museum and not for sale. However, there is the good old theory that photos of the photos might bring the effects of the curse wherever they're viewed. So like the shadow doll, you might be done for just by looking at these pictures of pictures. Maybe consider investing in some holy water or seeking out the advice of a paranormal expert. Good luck with all that. Coming in number 3, we've got demonic masks. Masks hold such rich meaning all across different cultures. The obscuring of one's face can cause so many things to happen, both good and bad. There's the classic idea that once a person puts on a mask, they will finally act as their true self. Others know that masks can protect folks from recognition, whether that means from other humans or paranormal entities that want to take something from you. On stage and in day-to-day performance, masks are associated with deception and hiding one's identity. So when they're used in dark rituals or other haunted rites, they may be inhabited by things other than people. Take a walk around the museum and you will find a treasure trove of creepy and disturbing face coverings. Uncanny Valley inhabitants of the highest order, these creations of rubber and paint can really be upsetting to look at for too long. Red-faced demons, dirty hags, strange screaming mouths, and more. A lot of them remind me of classics from Halloween 3 and Goosebumps, two mask-based experiences that shaped my childhood in ways we can't really get into today. Don't put any of them on, for nobody knows what might be dwelling within. Could be a nice spirit, or even better, nothing. Although there's always the risk of a malevolent demon waiting within, eagerly anticipating the moment an unsuspecting victim dons the mantle. Maybe stick to medical masks for now. No demons should be waiting in there, plus you'll keep all your droplets to yourself. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Tombstones of Children. Yes, you heard that correctly. The Warrens had a collection of grave markers meant to sit above children who passed on. Now, in their defense, apparently these had been collected after they exorcised some demons raised through satanic rituals. The tombstones were not originally moved by the Warrens, but by those who would perform these dark deeds. The Warrens simply took them to the museum after all was said and done, likely in an attempt to prevent others from using them in further rituals. Definitely a strange collection to have, all things considered. Is there something about a child's tombstone that makes it extra potent for ritual use? I wonder what the rationale is behind that, other than sounding extra taboo. And finally, at number 1, we've got a haunted brick. On its own, a brick doesn't seem so bad. It's just a bit of dried clay, that's all. But this brick is special. It was taken from Borley Rectory, also known as the most haunted building in England. This home, built for the rector of the Borley parish, had gained quite a bit of notoriety before burning down and being demolished. After it was built, many claimed that it was haunted by a number of spirits. These claims multiplied when a paranormal investigator published an account of his visit in the Daily Mirror. From there, many more folks decided to see what all the hype was. People claimed to see little Victorian boys roaming the grounds, only to disappear without a trace. Cars have been assailed by phantom thumps, and ghost lights shine brightly in their mirrors. But why would a building built for a rector be haunted from day one? Well, there's an ancient rumor that Borley Rectory was built upon the same grounds that the Benedictine monastery once stood. It was here that a monk and a nun partook in a forbidden relationship, eventually culminating in their untimely deaths. Since then, their presences have been felt all over the grounds, causing bells to ring without anyone around, recording equipment to malfunction, candlesticks to be thrown, and animals to be spooked. The rectory and the monastery are gone now, but the Warrens did procure a piece of the famously haunted place before it fell. One has to wonder how much haunted energy is still imbued in this brick. Would you be willing to pick it up? Who thinks spending a night in this museum would be a fun time? You'd probably see some really spooky stuff, that's for sure. It's hard to tell which items are the scariest because when it comes to the occult, things are never as they seem. Coming in at number 5, we've got a mask of Hannah Cranach. This item isn't necessarily intrinsically linked to the famous witch, but it is done up in her likeness and inspires folks to learn more about her magical ways. And that is impressive, so we'll talk about it. Way back when, in the far-off land of New England, there once lived a woman known as Hannah Cranach. She was an individual with a particularly short temper and a tendency to demand things of her neighbors with nothing offered in return. Come on, Hannah. Now, oftentimes her neighbors would say no to these demands, resulting in a bit of a tantrum from Miss Cranach. These could be scary and upsetting, but nothing too terrible, or so they thought. Often, after refusing Hannah Cranach a favor, these neighbors would have some misfortune befall them, and because of the rumors circulating, they didn't usually chalk this up to simple bad luck. No sir, they suspected witchcraft. The idea compounded over time, especially as things seemed to get worse around Hannah. Her husband wandered off into the night and perished after falling off a cliff. This put even heavier suspicion upon Hannah, who at this point was deemed a witch by all of her neighbors. And Hannah Cranach embraced this title with aplomb. Good for her, right? She took to walking around with her rooster, old Boreas, who many suspected to be her familiar. She cursed her baker neighbor to bake less tasty pies, and cursed a young fisherman to never catch a fish again. And eventually she foresaw her own death and made some more of her famous demands in relation to her burial. Her neighbors were told to carry her coffin to her grave by hand, not by cart. She also refused to be buried before sundown. Of course, when she kicked the bucket, they didn't want to deal with all this. But when they attempted to drag her coffin through the snow by sled, it would slide off and down the hill, forcing them to try again. And to top it all off, when they returned to Hannah Cranach's home at the end of the ordeal, it had burned to the ground. A witch through and through. So be careful while looking at this mask. Who knows if somehow Hannah Cranach could still be channeling power through it. Coming in number 4, we've got some satanic books. We've talked quite a bit about the allure and taboo that comes along with satanic rituals. When people find masks, dolls, tombstones, idols, and more associated with Satanism, they tend to get pretty freaked out. They tell tales about what these objects may have been used for in the past and generally attribute a whole lot of dark energy to them. Whether anyone doing this understands exactly what they're talking about is totally up in the air. It seems that every few decades or so there's a brand new satanic panic. X is leading to Y and it's going to corrupt our children. Why won't we think of the children? However, if folks took the time to attempt to understand what they were really talking about, I would bet that the panic might recede a little bit. The frantic reactions of the ill-informed will never stop, will they? On the many shelves of the Warren Occult Museum sit volumes and volumes of satanic books. These could be read by those afraid of what rituals might be impacting people around them, or they could sit there and look scary. If you're afraid of something, it is likely that you just don't understand it. Demystifying ideas and people and creatures is often a good way to really get to the core of what makes them scary, and then you can see them for what they really are. People would probably claim that all these satanic books at the museum are haunted or cursed or have a history of being used in evil rituals, but would never themselves read one to find out exactly what the contents entail. Maybe that saves them from being haunted, but also it could cause them to live in ignorance longer, using fear as an excuse to make broad assumptions and statements. I know this isn't a fantastic analysis of the actual books found at the Warren Occult Museum, but I feel like when discussing things like this it can be helpful to encourage curiosity over fear. Who knows? Maybe you'll learn something useful. Hopefully without having to resort to rituals and sacrifices. Coming in number 3, we've got some samurai armor. I'll be honest right off the bat here. This armor, as creepy and cool as it is, doesn't actually exist. Like, it's showcased briefly in the Conjuring cinematic universe, but we don't learn all that much about it. The reason for the lack of apparent backstory is simple. They made it up for the movie. Bit of a letdown, I know. But for it to have screen time, that must mean that there is a wicked tale to be told about this battle-hardened human protector. It may have belonged to a famously brutal warrior, one who took the heads of all his victims on the battlefield. Their poor, unfortunate souls doomed to reside within the carapace until the end of time. Maybe the bloodthirsty soul of the samurai himself still resides in the armor. Perhaps the suit has a different story altogether, free from battlefield use. What do you think the story is behind this fictional item? Coming in number 2, we've got some glass eyeballs. They see you. In general, old school prosthetics fall under the uncanny valley classification. The folks making them didn't have the technology or experience to make them truly comfortable or convincing, so we often ended up with weird facsimiles of human body parts that are quite unsettling to look at. To be honest, I think the pirates had it right. Forget fake parts, let's just use peg legs and eye patches. Of course, that's not exactly the most dignified way to live one's life, and not everyone wants to look like a pirate with a hook for a hand. So even before we had high quality prosthetics for general use, folks did their best to make replacement parts. And so we ended up with stuff like this. 2 foggy glass eyeballs inside of what appears to be an Altoids tin, ready to peer into your soul at a moment's notice. That's a grim image. And apparently, these eyeballs are haunted. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it must be blood-curdling. Maybe they float around at night, suspended in the air, implying a face that nobody can see. Or maybe a ghost without eyes pops them in from time to time, completing a face that went to the grave missing a couple of ocular grapes. No matter how you slice this, you've got a pair of roly-poly, disembodied eyeballs that cannot and will not blink. Things they must have seen. And finally, at number 1, we've got a dark magic doll. Unsurprisingly, the Warrens had a massive collection of scary dolls. Annabelle and the Shadow Doll are just the beginning, and are likely so well known compared to the others thanks to their relative power. These two will act on their own and often cause mischief and misfortune without being prompted. The dark magic doll is a little different, where it's still imbued with a curse, but has to be used by a human to take effect. According to Tony Spera, son-in-law of the Warrens, it operates kinda like a voodoo doll. By adding an image of the person you're attempting to harm to it, you can use it to cause plenty of pain in their life. Make the doll look like your target, perform a quick ritual, and maybe add some of their hair to the equation and you're set. Then you hang the doll and wait for it to take effect. Apparently those who are targeted by the effects of this magic doll will soon fall ill and eventually succumb to this illness. So don't be messing around with it for no reason. You've got to go in with intent. And just for funsies, please let us know if that's something you plan on doing in the future. You know, Just, so we know. We're not worried or anything, no way. Coming at number 5, we've got the satanic idol. Now, Satan is usually quite a controversial figure. In the past, any mention of the name would have been associated with something terrible, especially as satanic panic swept the nation. Why won't anyone think of the children, right? We love to assign weird moral values to stuff to ensure our political weight can be thrown around, but I'm getting off topic. These days, the jury is out on Satan. Many folks love the guy and worship him as ardently as anyone else would worship their deities. Some say he's a more forgiving figure than plenty of other gods and demigods. However, this idol doesn't seem to be associated with that end of the satanic spectrum. This one comes from the bowels of hell and brings with it misfortune and terror, or so they say. Let's take a look at this interesting oddity. With a misshapen horned head, piercing blue eyes, and a strange, unnaturally slim body, this doesn't necessarily look like the powerful demon most folks would assume is Satan. Artists can take liberties with the things they create, so don't write it off simply based on its looks. Apparently, a young hunter had been scavenging through the woods in Connecticut when he stumbled upon this cursed idol. He didn't really know what to do with it, but he took it along just as well. Soon after coming into possession of this horned artifact, he ran into an old man in dark robes, one telling tales of doom and horror. This, of course, spooked the hunter, who discussed this interaction with his friends. Eventually, after some sleepless nights and anxiety, he was put in contact with the Warrens, who came by to evaluate the idol. They deemed it haunted indeed and took it off the poor guy's hands. I'm sure he was very glad to be free of it. Ed and Lorraine strapped the devil thing in and brought it back to their museum, where it still remains. So if you ever get a hankering for some devil worship, or really want to look into some Gollum-esque blue eyes, you know where to go. Just be careful. That cloaked man in the woods is said to have been a worshipper of Satan, using the idol in dark and terrible rituals. I'm sure it's safe in the museum, but who knows? Coming in number 4, we've got the toy monkey. What is it about old school toys that makes them so creepy? Like, at some point in history, every single toy maker decided it was time to stop making them look that way and move on to much cuter, cuddlier, cooler, and overall less frightening things. Maybe tastes changed, or folks just collectively woke up to the fact that they were letting their kids play with nightmare objects, but regardless of the reason, I'm glad we've left these designs in the past. Dredging up these figures makes for some good spooky times though, right? Take this toy monkey for example. Would you buy your kids something like this these days? I'd wager no, and for good reason. Not only is it unsettling to look at, plenty of similar monkeys have been featured in the spookiest of scenes across Hollywood, but there's a lot of dark energy imbued in this particular monkey. The one at the Warrens Museum is said to carry a terrible curse. Hell, it was even featured in Annabelle Comes Home. So what does a little monkey have to do to earn such a reputation? Well, this one seems to stalk people, torment them, and then kill them. Oh no. Imagine this thing suddenly appearing in your life one day, then as time went on it started popping up in places you know you didn't leave it. Little monkey cymbals might be heard crashing in the middle of the night, and disembodied shuffling can keep you from sleeping. All that's creepy, but it's still just a toy, right? Hold up. Did its eyes just glow? That is some monkey business I want no part of. But hey, at least this one in particular is locked away and not to be recirculated into the general population of antique monkey toys. Well, for now anyway. Coming in number 3, we've got the Shadow Doll. Now, we've all got a particular cursed doll in mind when it comes to the Warrens, and now she's the star of a major motion picture franchise, so it seems that she's always gonna come in first. But there is another doll at the museum that should elicit at least the same amount of fear. That's right, I'm talking about the Shadow Doll. This thing is downright butt ugly. Like, Annabelle as an OG Raggedy Annie is kinda creepy, and they had to make sure they punched up the creepiness with some porcelain features and unnerving eyes for the movie. But if they made a movie featuring the Shadow Doll as is, I think they might actually have to make it less creepy. For real. I don't know if big movie theater chains would allow something like this on their screens. Feels like something out of a snuff film, maybe a low-budget exploitation flick. Nobody's looking at this and saying, oh yeah, I want to watch a whole movie based on this thing. Worse yet, the Shadow Doll seems to carry a much more terrible curse than most. Plenty of cursed dolls require you to be in the same room as them in order for the worst of the effects to hit you, but the Shadow Doll just needs you to view a picture of it to generate risk. Just looking at it means there's a chance it'll visit you in your dreams and kill you there, Freddy Krueger style. And based on looks, I don't think it would make it fun like Freddy does. It would just be brutal and upsetting. Goodness gracious. Coming in number 2, we've got the Pearls of Death. These are known for their outrageously dangerous powers. They might just look like a nice set of pearls waiting to be adorned by the fanciest of folk, but be warned, the glamour is not worth the price. And I'm not talking about how much you pay for them. No, it is not money that these pearls want, it is your life. Owners Owners of this particular string of aquatic orbs have complained time and time again of the necklace constricting around their throat and choking them. According to the first woman to adorn herself with this luxurious item, she felt as if she was being strangled as soon as she put them on. She attempted to take them off, but was unsuccessful. Panicked, she rushed out to request help, and it took multiple people yanking on the string to finally set her free. Since then, people have been very reluctant to wear these pearls. Some believe that a Satanist or black magic worshipper cursed the necklace before it was given to the unfortunate woman, kinda like the opposite of a holy person blessing an object. How fun. I wonder if we got a priest in there, whether they could cancel out the curse. I suppose not too many people are willing to test whether or not the pearls are still strangling. And finally, at number 1, we've got Annabelle, the Warren Museum tenant who needs no introduction, the mistress of the glass case, the shadow clawer of college boyfriends, the mega million movie star herself, Annabelle. What a classic cursed doll. Honestly, I'm sure the museum could liquidate most of their other objects and still have a similar crowd come by if they just kept Annabelle. Legendary. She looks a little different in real life than in the movies, although I'm sure this is true of any movie star. We've already discussed her Raggedy Annie appearance, especially compared to the more porcelain figure in the flicks. However, this doll makes up for a lack of spooky looks with a plethora of terrifying tales. After being gifted to a nursing student, Annabelle started acting strange. She'd move around the house on her own and leave little notes to the girls living there. Eventually, she would attack and strangle the boyfriend of one of the students, leaving them desperate for help. The Warrens soon arrived and whisked the doll away. However, they seemed to know just how wretched and terrible she could be, and as such, they locked Annabelle away in a holy box. This seems to keep her at bay, but who knows? Someday she could break free once again.